afternoon, everyone, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 101 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Today we have witnesses both online and in the room. So online, I'm just going to remind you, put up your hand, make sure that your interpretation is chosen to your choice, and also if you are not speaking, just please have it on mute. For the people in the room, just ensure that you choose French, English, or on the floor. Those are your options. And the last thing is to keep your earpiece away from the microphone. So that's just some detailing there. And a reminder that all questions should come through the chair. We will be keeping a speaking list if there's any other questions, and we'll continue with that. So let's get back to business. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, November 27th of 2023, the committee will resume its study on the implementation of the red dress alert. And sorry, got to turn my page here. And today in person we have 2 witnesses and online another. Yes? G. Okay, fantastic. So I was just looking at this. So from the National Family and Survivor Circle, we have Hilda Anderson Perez, who is the chair, as well as, oh my gosh, Kylie, but I don't know your last name.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Keely Tenfingers, and I'm a technician with the National Family and Survivors Circle Incorporated, and I'm here as a support to Hilda. Thank you for having us here today.
And thank you so much for coming in and filling in that. Online, you will find Sandra Delarond, and this is where Sandra's going to help me, because although she has helped me say this, it is an Ojibwa word, and so it's Giganan Ima Anan Anig. And so I am sorry, and please, I'm sure, Sandra, you're rolling your eyes. You may have to fix that for me. But what we will be doing is we will be passing the floor over for our witnesses, 5 minutes for each group. And so I'll pass the floor over. We'll be going online first to Sandra. Sandra, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. When you say you just pretend.
If you could hold for 1 moment. The volume in the room is very, very low, so could we raise that? Please go ahead and start again.
Okay, Madam Chair. So when you say Gaganawe Mananik, you just imagine yourself canoeing down the Red River, which is where I am today. The waters aren't open yet, but they're getting there. So thank you for this opportunity to present to the Standing Committee today on the Red Dress Alert. So the safety and protection and well-being of Indigenous women, girls, and gender-diverse relatives must be essential in creating a better country. The final report of the National Inquiry, Reclaiming Power and Place, outlined a central finding of genocide, and had outlined 231 calls for justice that would create transformative change for Indigenous women, girls, and our gender-diverse relatives. It is critical that the Red Dress Alert, or whatever we choose to name it, be implemented immediately. Myself, along with many of our colleagues, some who are at the table, held consultations over the winter to hear from community, distinction-based representative political organizations, community-based organizations, about what an alert system means, what it could look like, and how it should be implemented or could be implemented. What is clear is that an alert system must be co-developed and co-led by Indigenous relatives. That beyond an alert, that support to the community and to families of the missing must be in place. People that are actually going to look for the missing, and people that are going to support families during the process, and people that will support those that have been located. there is a requirement for a wraparound support. And each one of those functions also requires training to ensure that communities and families have the capacity to support one another. The alert system, when it is implemented, should take into account regional disparities and be very clearly and have an accessible approach where technology, language, and community are considered. Indigenous people living in urban areas have been largely ignored, erased, or undermined, and silenced under the current distinction-based approach. So there must be respect for full inclusion of the urban Indigenous population. We with Gaganawe-Mananig have been working on a data project that we call a story map that clearly outlines that many of those that have gone missing or murdered in our territory come from communities, certainly, but have relocated to urban environments for medical education and for the reasons of escaping poverty and violence. Many of these relatives have then become vulnerable and targeted by perpetrators of violence. I could share many anecdotes that would illustrate the ongoing systemic violence. However, there's not the time. It should be considered that many of our relatives are indeed internally displaced persons under the meaning of the UN Convention on Refugees in 1951. In fact, we must provide support in a manner which acknowledges the human rights and international conventions of our relatives. Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add on because online the camera was off, so I didn't get a chance to introduce Charlene Lavalley, who is the president of the Association of Métis, Non- and Status Indian Saskatchewan. So Charlene, I'll come back to you in 5 minutes, but thank you very much for joining us as well. I'm now going to pass the floor over to Hilda. Hilda, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Standing Committee on the Status of Women members. I am Hilda Anderson-Piers, Chair of the National Family and Survivors Circle, a nonprofit organization incorporated in April of 2023, led by Indigenous women and gender diverse individuals who are impacted, family members of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people, and survivors of gender and race-based violence. I respectfully recognize that our meeting today is taking place on the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Today, I stand with the MMIWG2S Plus families, survivors, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people whose resilience and advocacy have been critical and pushing forward the Red Dress Alert initiative. My thanks to the federal government and MP Leah Gazan for their efforts towards the establishment and forthcoming implementation of the Red Dress Alert, a reflection of decades of advocacy for transformative changes and action. The Red Dress Alert is an essential tool for the protection of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people, representing a significant advancement in our response to the crisis. Our communities are confronted with the daily disappearances of Indigenous women, girls, 2S LGBTQIA plus people, a reflection not of choice but of a societal disregard for Indigenous lives, making us targets for violence. The urgency of these situations cannot be overstated. When an Indigenous woman, girl, and gender diverse individual goes missing, immediate action is crucial in mobilizing information, resource, and collaborative efforts to facilitate locating them safely. The development and implementation of the Red Dress Alert should be led by Indigenous women, gender diverse people, and frontline Indigenous organizations. Effective response requires listening to those directly affected, especially in remote areas like Nunavut, where limited connectivity poses additional challenges. Engagements in these communities are essential to gather insights and guide our actions. The Red Dress Alert, along alongside comprehensive wraparound support services, aims to prevent and respond to these disappearances. These services must be rooted in Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, and be independent from political influence. It is critical that they uphold the fundamental human rights of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people in order for us to live with dignity and safety. I call on all levels of government to support the Red Dress Alert and its associated services, highlighting the need for prompt, impactful action and investments in a dedicated alert system for the Indigenous community. In conclusion, I thank you for this opportunity. The implementation of the Red Dress Alert is critical, not just a policy measure, but as a commitment to resolving the MMIWG 2S Plus national crisis without political obstruction. Our actions now can provide an opportunity for a secure, safer, more dignified future for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people. Igose, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're now going to go online. And so, Charlene, you have 5 minutes, but when you see me start moving my arms, your time's over. Okay, so Charlene, 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Charlene Lavalle. I'm the president of the Association of Métis, Non- and Status Indians of Saskatchewan. We have community charters across the province in several different areas. On the northwest side of Saskatchewan, which is very remote, northeast Saskatchewan, which is even more remote. Then we move into our urban centers and we cover all the urban centers in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan encompasses or includes in its treaty territory treaties 8, 10, 6, 7, 4, 2, and 5. And Saskatchewan is also the home of the Métis. AMSIS is not part of the distinctions-based groups. We are an organization under the Congress of Aboriginal People. We have been involved with the MMIWG National Roundtable since 2016. Up until February of this year, we were involved. There was a meeting this February that we were not invited to attend personally. In regards to the Red Dress Alert, I'd like to thank MP Leah Gazan for putting this forward. I listened in on the communication on Tuesday in relation to, it was more about the processes of an alert system. And it was really interesting to hear how quickly it could be onboarded and started. I would say that one of the hardest things that has happened for MMIWG has been Bill C-18. Many of our people get their news on social media, and with news not being allowed any longer on social media, that has led to a large void in sharing the information about recent people who've gone recently missing. Couple of things I'd like to touch on is that it does need to, this Red Dress Alert and everything attached to MMIWG needs to be Indigenous led and needs to include all Indigenous people in Canada. The current distinctions-based policy identifying organizations is unconstitutional. The Constitution of Canada states, Section 35, are First Nations, Inuit, Métis. Daniels also included non-status in Section 35. Section 35 does not state AFN, ITK, and MNC. It does not state that. And right now with the distinctions-based approach, that's the approach that this government is using, and it's leaving out all the non-status, and it takes away my freedom of choice that I am supposed to have under the Charter of Rights and under UNDRIP, and thereby choosing to only work with certain groups. Again, Indigenous people, primarily women, are being left out of processes that could save their lives. All aspects of MMIWG calls to action need to be inclusive of all Indigenous groups. It should not be political. And processes need to be nationally streamlined by Indigenous organizations. The policing has not always worked in favor of vulnerable Indigenous people, and neither have government agencies like social workers. So I think that when considering all of these factors, that we have always said that policing has been a big part of the problem. And I think that those things need to be heard. And are you waving your hand at me?
Oh, yes, Charlene, I am.
It was a faraway shot of the whole room, so I was just making sure. So yes, that would be what I have to say at this point.
Well, thank you so much for your testimony so far. What we're going to be doing is we'll be going around the room. Each party will have 6 minutes to ask their first round of questions, and then we'll go into our second round. I'm going to take the floor over to Michelle Ferrari for your first 6 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, guys, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Certainly an important study that's impacted my riding, too, of Peterborough, Kawartha, and across this country. I'd like to hear from all of you, the point of this study really is to get a handle on how we best roll this out. How does it most efficient? And we had a phenomenal witness here this week who was just a rock star in doing it in Nova Scotia, and I'm sorry her first name has left me. Jennifer. Yeah, she was just incredible. And she had some really great points. And I guess, we hear the same thing from a lot of the witnesses, Indigenous led, for Indigenous, by Indigenous, which I think is critical. She didn't support the idea of this being government run. But I guess my question, and I'll start with Hilda if I can, and then ask the other witnesses to answer too. How do you see this? Do you see it independent of each location? Because we also have many Indigenous women and girls living off reserve, right? Living in urban centers. How do you see it rolled out? Is it a national program? How do you see it implemented?
First of all, I just want to really amplify that this is a national crisis, so I see it rolling out on a national level, to be fully supported and everybody to be part of it and to develop it collectively. Because we see one of the biggest challenges that we see, in working on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is the issue of borders and jurisdiction, and that often hinders responses. So I think it has to be national in scope, and there has to be a national response, and it has to be, equitably resourced, to ensure that it is successfully implemented, and that regardless of where you live and which community you're from, that you're able to access the system.
Before I get the other witnesses to answer on that, to that point, and it was Jennifer who said this. I mean, she was kind of this person that just did it, right? And she talked about bureaucracy. And sometimes you have these great ideas and nothing happens because everybody sits around the table and goes, yeah, that sounds great. And then everybody walks away and there's no action tied to it because there's not one sort of leader. How do we prevent sort of bureaucracy in something like this? And I'm happy to hear if there's the other witnesses want to chime in. That is the biggest hurdle I see in a lot of these things, because I can't think of anybody who would dispute having this alert in place to save lives.
I think ultimately there has to be an accountability mechanism in place, to ensure that there is transformative action and commitment to ensure that, the red dress alert is implemented, because ultimately, inaction results in the continuance of the disappearances and the murders of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people. So I really think that, ethically we have to look at the urgency for commitment and action because our lives are dependent upon it.
Do any of the other witnesses online, Chantel, do you want to chime in?
I was just going to say, I think that this is very urgent. The calls to action were completed. It would be interesting to know how many more women have gone missing or murdered since the completion of the action plan. It's a daily thing. And for the families that have lost family members, it's for some of them, it's too late. So I think that it's very important. And I agree that it needs to be a national level with provincial, entities and working together, and instead of everybody working in separate little silos. And this way the information is shared across all jurisdictions.
So to Sandra, if I can, I guess what I'm really asking is to the nuts and bolts, how do we make it national, but then give autonomy and not have it government interfered with?
I think that there is a place for government in all of this. Oftentimes we know historically and even in contemporary times for things to move in the community, it has been Indigenous women with no support that have created change and have maintained change in our communities. So, and we have been carrying these issues for at least the last 50 years on our own. And so now we need government, we need bureaucracy to support this change because we can't do it on our own. Obviously, that when rules and policies and laws don't change and they continue to, in the numbers of those that go missing and murdered continues to increase, we're not able to do this on our own. We need governments, we need bureaucracies to support and invest in change and invest in safety. We can start the alert now, and we must start it now because women go missing. Summer for many people is a time of rest and respite, but for those of us on the ground, we know that the numbers of our relatives that go missing or murdered increases with the temperature. So we can do that. People that want to talk some more can talk some more and, work out whatever details or jurisdictional wrangling they may have, but we have to get it done now.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move over, and Emmanuel Lambropoulos has the floor for 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I want to start by thanking all of our witnesses for their great testimony and for being here to answer some questions on this very important study brought forward by Leah Gazan, who is a big advocate and talks about this very, very often and makes sure that we're talking about it here. So my first question is actually going to go to Charlene because you were the last one to testify, and so this one is top of mind for me. You mentioned that policing is part of the problem, that law enforcement hasn't always sided with vulnerable Indigenous women, and I agree, of course. And I'm wondering what changes you think can be made in order to improve that situation and in order to improve collaboration with the police in order to make the red dress alert something that they're helping and helpful in?
Well, ultimately, our police services are overworked as it is. And a lot of times when you're dealing with an issue of somebody missing, it takes a lot more time and effort and report processing than the police are able to put into. And it could always start with an organization outside of the police. It could it could start with an organization taking the information, working with the family, and then notifying the police, the agency notifying the police and going from there. This isn't a criminal offense. It's not, at that point, it's not a criminal incident. So it doesn't necessarily have to have police involvement right from the get-go. So and I guess I would, and we all recall, what was it, 2 years ago, it's just a check on the wellness of somebody, and we had a young Indigenous woman get killed, because sometimes it's things that are simple like that, and we have a stigma when it comes to policing and police officers, and sometimes it just de-escalates a whole situation when it's, somebody from their own community checking on them rather than a police officer.
Okay. So the trust is what's obviously missing, and it would be better if they were only involved when they need to be.
Correct.
Hilda, I'll go to you. You talked about the fact that it's necessary and critical for us to implement this as quickly as possible. There have been other witnesses that have been more in favor of it being run by organizations, and I think you spoke to that point as well. But of course, federal and provincial governments should also be helping fund and should be playing a role. And I'm wondering what role you think that the provinces and territories should play versus the role that the federal government should play.
Well, I think, one of the things that I really amplify in doing this work is, regardless if you're the federal government or provincial territorial government, everybody has a responsibility to be actors in the safety and security of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people. And because, they have many individuals who reside in their provinces and territories, who go missing at alarming rates, I think it's really critical that everybody, take a collective, collaborative approach in the implementation of the red dress alert in order for it to be successful, like I mentioned previously, because often jurisdictional boundaries have hindered, the safe location of an Indigenous woman, girl, or Two-Spirit and gender diverse person. So I think it's equal participation amongst all governments.
Okay, thank you. Your name is being blocked, and I don't have it. Sandra, apologies. Sandra, you spoke about it, the importance of implementing it, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what we can do to ensure that it's safe and that it warrants the trust of Indigenous partners.
I think so. So the way the alert system currently works in the provinces is it's generally managed through their emergency management services, and decisions made on whether or not alerts go out is made by the police force. So I think having the family members or representatives of the community at the table when making those decisions is critical to ensuring trust. And then if an alert it's determined an alert doesn't go out, that there be a measure in place that there would be an opportunity to review alongside community whether or not that was the right measure to take.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move it over to Audreyne LaRoche. Audreyne, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all witnesses for being here today. I feel we have a duty of memory toward these girls and women who have been missing or murdered. We have to honor their memory and make sure that they did not die in vain. I'd like to begin with you, Madam. In your opening remarks, you talked about mobilizing people, engaging resources. Now we have to make sure how do you see what kind of resources will you need to mobilize so that this red dress alert can really be effective?
Thank you. I think, some of the critical resources we need is infrastructure, and to ensure that everybody has access to this red dress alert system, especially when we're looking at individuals who live in remote, isolated areas. And in addition to that, there also has to be wraparound supports, to support individuals who are in vulnerable positions who have gone missing. And, that there's a long-term sustainable commitment to fully resource the red dress alert system and to sustain it, because it just can't be, a one-off that it happens for 1 year and it does not continue. We need to ensure that it's around, for many, many years and for many generations, because our lives matter.
Merci beaucoup. Je reviendrai plus tard.
Thank you very much. I'll get back to you later with other questions. Now, following what I just asked about, Madame de la Ronde, in your report, you talked about the importance of support for families and that it should be a wraparound support. How do you see this wraparound support? Because this red dress alert won't be a magic wand. You'll need a whole spectrum, a continuum of services, all kinds of things. For example, prevention, other things. We're talking. I think that our study has to go beyond the alert itself.
Yes, absolutely. The study has to go the work has to go beyond that annoying noise that we get on our phone, that we have to have people that are going to, once that alert is actioned, that there are going to be people on the ground that would assist and support families in locating their loved ones. And then that requires, whether we're looking at the Rangers model that in the NWT and the Yukon, or whether we're looking at the volunteer firefighters model in the provinces. Those people we have people that have some experience and dedication to the well-being of society that we can call upon to support this initiative. As well, families need to have wellness supports when someone goes missing. And critically, that we find that those that have gone missing and have been returned to families are traumatized, and so that there needs to be support to help them to regain their confidence and sense of well-being when they're returned to their families. So it's not just, issuing an alert on the system. It's important to provide that full spectrum of services. Thank you.
Oui, tout à fait. Je crois que.
Yes, exactly. I think that's very wise, and we will have to bear this in mind as we work on our report. Ms. Lavade, in your opening remarks, you talked about including all groups and also the importance of this not being a political issue. And with you too, Ms. Laronde, I think that you mentioned this. But Ms. Lavallée, do you believe that this is a risk? What makes you think that at this stage there's a risk of this becoming political?
It already has become political. As I stated, we've been involved, the Congress of Aboriginal People had been involved with the roundtable, MMIWG roundtable, since 2016. And in February, there was first time it was an in-person in regards to the finalization since the completion of the calls to action. And our organization was not invited to attend personally. We asked if we could attend personally, and they did not invite us and would not change their mind and
Charlene?
stated that it. Yes.
I know. 10 more seconds, or just a few seconds to end this because we have to get on to our next round. So very, very, very quick.
Okay. We were told it was distinctions based only, which is MNC, AFN, and ITK.
Thank you so much. We're now going to turn it over to Leah Gazan. Leah, 6 minutes.
So I just want to start out by thanking this committee who have prioritized bringing our women and girls and diverse gendered relatives home. I want to thank you all for always making space for this discussion, and also to the women who join us in the room, real champions on literally the front lines night and day working on this issue, not just in an academic sense, but also working directly with families every single day. I want to thank you all for your efforts. My first question is for Hilda. You mentioned Nunavut. You know, I know through the consultations there was like technology issues and all of that stuff. Why do you think it's important to engage stakeholders in Nunavut directly? Like, what are some of the reasons in that?
I think it's critical to engage, you know, due to their remoteness and their isolation and their connectivity challenges as well. And, you know, we need to ensure that all Indigenous people have services and infrastructure to meet their social and economic needs, for all governments to uphold the social and economic rights of Indigenous women, girls, and to us LGBTQIA plus people, you know, with a focus on call for justice 4.1, you know. And additionally, like, their experiences, you know, can educate us, you know, so that we ensure that their experiences and the type of services and responses that they need are included, you know, because we often see a lack of resources and supports and, you know, a lack of engagement. Many people factor in the cost to engage our northern remote, our relatives who live in northern remote areas, but, you know, cost should not be a factor. They should have equitable participation in all different types of initiatives that are going to impact their lives.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Sandra. We've heard, I know that you, Hilda, spoke of it. I know that, Charlene, you spoke about this in terms of political interference. I'm wondering if you agree with that. And if you do agree, like, what does that look like very quickly? And how can things be done in a way that there's not political interference? And what is political interference? Quickly, in 20 seconds. Just kidding, but... Just kidding.
Well, I think, no, you're not kidding. I think that there is political interference. There's a want to appease individuals or individual organizations, and let me be clear that they are representative political organizations. They are not governments, regardless of the wording that has been used. They are representative political organizations. And many of us on the ground, on the front lines, have no less a commitment or responsibility to ensure change in our communities. I think that there needs to be greater weight given to those that actually do the work on the ground. And we've seen that through the consultations, those that had clear and distinct answers were those that did the work on the ground. So, and I understand it, that, people want more time to talk and to engage. And certainly that can happen along with the implementation process, because we know that when we talk and we find ways that we can do things better together, and but we can't wait because we've waited too long.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Charlene, just building on that. We've heard a lot, a lot of these battles have been led by women from our communities on the front lines of this issue, often unpaid. Why is it critical to center the voices of women, diverse gendered folks and families that have been impacted by this ongoing genocide?
You're on mute. Charlene, you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't even get the question in that. Was that a question, is why
To
is it
center
the women?
women, diverse genders, and impacted families in terms of decision-making and discussions on the red dress outside of political organizations? Why is that critical?
Well, I think because a lot of it, we're the mothers, we're the aunties, the grandmothers. We've been the center of our families. And I think that when it comes to the emotional stuff that goes with all of those things that come with somebody going and missing, is that it's usually the women who are the ones who are on the ground doing the work. So that would be my answer to that.
Okay, so I just want to again I only have 12 seconds, so I just again want to thank the committee. This means so very much. And also the witnesses that I just hold in such high regard, and just thank you for, it just feels so good to my spirit having other strong Indigenous women with me in committee today. It's a real treat. So thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much,
Leah.
Thanks, Leah. We're now going to go on to our second round. It's 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 2.5, 2.5. I'll pass the floor over to Anna.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all you brave ladies, because I know how important this study is, and thanks to Leah for bringing it forward. So I'm going to share something with you because I can kind of relate somehow, because I was part of the foster system, so I've seen a lot of stuff that I'd rather not speak about. But one of the things I read this book recently, and it says, If I Go Missing. And it was written by, at the time, a 14-year-old young lady in 2016, Brianna Johnny. I hope I pronounced that right. And she wrote a letter to the Winnipeg Police Services imploring them to do better when investigating cases of missing Indigenous people. So I read on to the book, and I'm not going to read it all, but there was a quote in here that really kind of affected me. I guess maybe as well as what I had experienced in my past. And she wrote, she said, 2 years later, this is when she's older now, Brianna questioned Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a town hall at the University of Winnipeg about the murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls inquiry. When so many no longer trust the process, how will you measure in qualified terms where the inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls is successful? So I'm thinking this is 2024, so if I can do my math, I think that's about 8 years. So I guess coming from the private sector, I am so sick and tired of things taking so bloody long. So I'd like to hear your comments, Hilda, because this is important. What do you say to that?
You know, I'm coming from the lens of an Indigenous woman, and often, you know, it feels like our lives are not valued, you know, that we don't matter, that, You know, it sends a message to society that it's okay to kill us, it's okay to kidnap us, it's okay to exploit us when governments do not take the necessary action. You know, that transformative action where there's impact on the ground, where I can feel safe and secure as an Indigenous woman in this country, and that my granddaughters and generations to come know that our lives are valued, and that if we go missing, that people are going to look for us, and they're going to take transformative action, and we're going to be safely located. And more importantly, that we're not going to continue to go missing at alarming rates, you know, that our lives matter, that we're valued, and that we have equity and equality in this country, and that our rights are upheld.
Well, I want to tell you, if anybody hasn't read this book, it is a great read. I had tears reading it. I'm not going to lie. I have tears even talking about it. So I guess my next question is, to Charlene, you stated that when victims are found, they are traumatized. Is there any penalties for the perpetrators? And if so, what are those penalties? And what can we learn to stop this type of victimization?
There have been penalties, but if you go back on previous cases, the penalties have not been, I would say they have not been meaningful at all. And if anything, they've actually said that our lives are worth less because the penalties
Sorry to interrupt. So the penalties don't meet the crime. So how would you agree with me that we should give these perpetrators 25 years in jail to life?
Each individual case is different. I wouldn't say that, you know, but I definitely more than 18 months or 2 years for getting a hitch in the back of the head and changing somebody's life.
And the reason I say that is I met a 9-year-old recently who went through this traumatization, and it's a life-changing event. It's something that is so difficult to get over. And when they know that those perpetrators are out on the road again, it re-traumatizes them. So if we are going to do something to avoid this, we need to make the penalty fit the crime, because victims deserve to walk the streets without fear. Would you agree?
I 100% agree. But I would even go further and state that our mental health in Saskatchewan and across Canada is in crisis, because there are people out there that are suffering with those same experiences right now. And in Saskatchewan, it takes you 2 years to see a psychiatrist.
Perfect. Charlene, I have to cut you off again. I'm so sorry about this, but I'm now going to move it over for the next 5 minutes to Anita Vandenbelt. Anita, you have the floor for 5.
Yes, thank you very much, and I want to thank all of our witnesses, not just for being here today, but for all of the work that you're doing on this. And I guess my first question is really about the fact that, you know, some of you have mentioned the North, Nunavut, and issues and challenges around get the access to the communication systems, and then others talk about urban Indigenous and completely different challenges. How do we create a single system for the entire country when the challenges and the needs, and it's so incredibly different in different parts of the country? If I could maybe start with Ms. Anderson-Pierce, and then I'll go right.
I think, you know, when we're looking at it, we look at the need to provide, you know, funding for adequate resources so that each area can develop like the tools and the infrastructure that they need to, you know, be participants and to access these systems, you know. And, you know, especially when we're looking at the North, we know that there's inequity and inequality in accessing any type of service or support. And there needs to be a lot of work done there. And, you know, when we look at it's kind of like we also see like Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people who are leaving, you know, remote, isolated areas to access education, to access health, or to access, you know, a new way of life. So when we have to look at it like, you know, from a circular model and build that infrastructure so everybody feels that they're part of it and that this system is accessible.
If I may just follow up before I go to the others. When you talk about that infrastructure, maybe if you could be specifically, what exactly does that mean in terms of staff, in terms of funding, in terms of how it would
So
work?
we need to look at like what is the infrastructure required. Like I'm not a technician by any means, but like, you know, the technical aspect of them having the tools and the technology to participate in this red dress alert, but also the supports and resources, you know, to take care of the mental and emotional well-being of individuals who have been impacted, you know, by violence and who have gone missing as well. But we also need to look at it from a prevention lens as well, and to ensure that supports and resources are there to, you know, prevent Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people from going missing.
Ms. De La Ronde, you mentioned urban Indigenous. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit as well about the different challenges, the different structures and the different needs that there may be for urban Indigenous peoples.
Oh, okay, thank you for your question. Could I just say, this morning I got up and I thought, geez, you know, what would it be like to get up and not have to worry about, you know, one of our loved ones going missing or one of our loved ones being murdered? That's the reality as Indigenous moms and grandmothers in this country. No one else has to experience that. Winnipeg is known as ground zero. And, you know, if I could wake up in the morning and know that this is a safe country, a safe city for my daughter and granddaughter, I would be the happiest woman alive. And knowing that there are disparities between representative political organizations, that there is limited funding, that really the ones that are doing doing the work on the ground is families and survivors. So they need to have adequate resource. But we also have to support them going beyond the trauma, you know, because we can be stationary in this place and it doesn't serve the individual or the community in any way. When someone is murdered in our community, the perpetrator is not asking them if they're First Nations or Métis or Inuit. They just know that it is a vulnerable Indigenous woman that they're taking their lives. So I think that we need to consider that as you know, understanding that the urban environment is different, that we take into account the community that are already doing the work and support those communities in developing greater support and accessibilities for our families. There is a room for distinction. If I could just add, there is a room for distinction based in the area of prevention.
I just want to thank you because it's easy to forget how real this is, the grief, the trauma that you are all living when we're putting a system together. I want to thank you for reminding us of that.
Thanks very much. We're now going to move over to Adrienne Laroche for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Adrienne, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you again to our witnesses. Thank you for appearing today. Your testimony is extremely instructive. Ms. De La Ronde, I'd like to get back to your opening remarks. You talked about UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I'd like you to talk about this a little more because as we try to establish this nation-to-nation relationship in the context of national reconciliation, I'd like you to talk a little more about the spirit of UNDRIP for the Red Alert, and do you know of any experiences in other countries that are similar?
I can say that what I do know is that there is a movement in the Global South that is, again, you know, looking to Canada, but in other ways are more advanced than Canada in terms of providing protection on the basis of rights to Indigenous women and girls. I don't think that we have really had an inclusionary process in this country that recognizes Indigenous women as rights holders. And that was affirmed in the final report of the National Inquiry, and we need to continue to support what does those rights look like for Indigenous women and their families. It certainly is not necessarily what's presented because there hasn't been that opportunity to speak with us because our voices have been silent. So creating those opportunities to hear from Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse relatives is really important and critical in the red dress movement, but more importantly, in how we live in civil society. One of the things that we have often forgotten or misplaced is, as a result of the genocidal policies of government, that in fact Indigenous women are misplaced, are internally displaced persons under the meaning of the UN Convention on Refugees. So what does that look like? How will we deal with that in terms of the long-term?
Thanks very much. I do have to cut you off for the next section, so thank you very much. I'm now going to pass it over to Leah for the final round.
Thank you so much. I know that all the witnesses spoke about the importance of wraparound supports. My question is for Hilda. What does wraparound supports look like for you, and why is it important?
Thank you so much, Leah. And, I just really wanted to quickly amplify, when we look at this is really about justice and human security as well. And we really need to put a lens on the principles for change from the National Inquiry, when we look at a focus on substantive equality, on human and Indigenous rights, it has to be like a decolonizing approach. Wraparound services, they have to be strength-based, rooted in our Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing. They have to be holistic, and it will help with, strengthen us as Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people with the protective factors, to allow us to live a life with dignity, and safety. In addition to this, wraparound services also uphold our Indigenous and human rights, because as Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people, when we're born with a bundle of rights, and right from birth as Indigenous women, our rights are not upheld. So it's really critical, especially when we look at Call for Justice 3.4, which is, for all governments to ensure Indigenous communities receive immediate and necessary resources, including funding and support for the establishment of sustainable, permanent, no barrier, preventative, accessible, holistic wraparound services. And in addition to this, I also wanted to quickly highlight Call for Justice 3.1. It states that all governments ensure the rights to health and wellness of Indigenous people, and specifically Indigenous women and girls are recognized and protected on an equitable basis. And, we also look at the importance of creating pathways for human security. And if we do that, we will be really focusing on what wraparound supports look like from our lens, and ensuring that, we see ourselves in those wraparound supports, that we feel connected, that we feel like we belong, and these supports are meeting our needs, from a cultural lens, because often supports and services that are out there are not meeting our needs, and often they're, really deeply embedded with systemic and structural racism. And when we're vulnerable, we're seeking safety. We continue to experience violence because of the systemic and structural racism.
Wow, what an incredible panel. I would like to begin by just thanking Hilda and Keely, and online Sandra and Charlene. Thank you so much for your testimony today. We do greatly appreciate it. What we're going to be doing is we're going to suspend so we can switch over panels, and then we'll get started immediately. So thank you to the ladies, and back in a second. back to reconvening, and I'd like to welcome everybody. If everybody could take their seat, that would be wonderful. Okay, so I would like to welcome you back. Just for the ladies who are on today's panel, I'm just going to remind you for your earpieces. Well, your earpieces aren't a problem, but whenever you're not speaking, if you could make sure that you just have your microphone off, that would be very useful. So thank you very much. And also, I'm sure you know about interpretation. But what we're going to do is I would now like to welcome two witnesses for this next panel. Before we get started, I am going to notice, because everybody knows that today we do have votes. Bells will be going at 5:15. I believe that we have, and we will take a vote at that time, but I believe we all will go to at 5:25, and I'll ask for that unanimous consent at that time. But we only do have two panelists during this time, and although we're starting late, it will all work out in the end. So what I would like to do is provide, just to begin, I'd like to welcome the Native Council of Prince Edward Island, and we have Lisa Cooper, who's the president and chief. And from the Congress of Aboriginal People, we have Jessica Savoy, who is the national youth representative. I'll pass it over to Lisa Cooper for your 5 minutes of testimony. When you see my arm going up, please wind up your time.
Thank you. So I do want to give land acknowledgement. I am from Prince Edward Island, which is my traditional ancestral homelands of my ancestors, of the Mi'kmaq peoples. So hello, members of the Standing Committee on the Status of Women. My name is Lisa Cooper. I am the President-Chief of the Native Council of Prince Edward Island. My organization has existed since 1975, advocating for the rights of off-reserve Indigenous people for nearly 50 years. Just recently, there has been an instance of a missing and murdered Indigenous woman in PEI. Summer Kneebone was reported missing on August the 7th, 2023. My organization rallied around the family immediately, and we spent the next month working closely with the municipal police, RCMP, and volunteers to locate Summer Kneebone remains on September 15th. In this instance, there were many issues that my organization encountered in our search efforts. The municipal police force and our CMP officers did not know what the acronym MMIWG stood for. They did not communicate with each other to coordinate our volunteer search efforts, and PEI had not yet implemented a Missing Persons Act that authorized the police or RCMP to request access to Summer's social media records. As Canada's smallest province, cases of MMIWG are not as common for us, but situations has untold impacts on smaller communities. My organization works closely with our sister organization, the New Brunswick Aboriginal Peoples Council, in supporting their Looking Out for Each Other project. This project is a collaboration between the maritime provinces in reporting cases of missing Indigenous peoples and coordinating efforts between our provinces for search efforts. We have found through this project that there are many cases in which an Indigenous person goes missing in one maritime province only to be found in another province. This project has shown on a small scale the success that can occur when search efforts are coordinated across different provinces, organization, and police services. The red dress alert that is being proposed by the government will be a natural extension of the work already being done in the maritime provinces and will be welcomed greatly by our communities. Between 2017 and 2019, I served as a representative of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples on the MMIWG Working Group table, providing input on the 2021 MMIWG National Action Plan. In the 3 years since the MMIWG National Action Plan was released, I have seen little commitment from the federal government to address MMIWG to LGBTQIA+ off-reserve communities. The MMIWG National Action Plan provided an inclusive definition for distinction-based supports that included off-reserves, urban, and two-spirit representation. Over 80% of the Indigenous people in Canada live off-reserve, and yet our voices is often silent in consultations. In moving forward in the development of the Red Dress Alert, I ask that the federal government uphold the inclusive approach to MMIWG promised in the National Action Plan and ensure that the voices of the off-reserve Indigenous peoples, as represented by the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, can be heard in the development of the Red Dress Alert. Thank you, honourable members, for your time. Malalian.
Thank you so much. And we'll continue online with Jessica Savoy. Jessica, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Good evening, standing committee members on the status of women. Thank you very much for the opportunity to bear witness to this important issue. My name is Jessica Savoy, and I'm a proud Nisga'a woman born and raised in the beautiful unceded Coast Salish territories of what we now know as Vancouver. I am calling from unceded Coast Salish territories, and I just would like to share briefly. I am the Vice President of the Northwest Indigenous Council and the National Youth Representative for the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. I'm happy to be here with you and to advocate on behalf of my community as well as the CAP National Youth Council and to better the lives of all Indigenous peoples in Canada, you know, to help in doing that. So I just wanted to share also, you know, most of my life I've worked with community to implement policy, engage on important issues affecting them, and to work with Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth within the inner city neighborhoods of Vancouver, but also across the country through my representative role with the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. I have experience working with local nonprofits and municipal governments in various capacities, and so I wanted to just share my experience and perspectives on the Red Dress Alert and some insight from the CAP youth on its implementation. We know that in May 2023, the House of Commons supported a motion that deemed the ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S and gender diverse peoples a national emergency and called for funding for an alert system to inform the public when an Indigenous person is missing. In December, through the MMIWG working group, CAP participated in the Red Dress Alert engagement with the Family and Survivor Circle. They chose to engage CAP and others because the federal government wasn't engaging enough groups. Much work remains and requires the perspective and insights of all Indigenous partners. The Red Dress Alert was also on the agenda of the Indigenous Federal Provincial Territorial meeting held in February, and again, we were not fully included in this conversation. I do want to note, though, I was invited very last minute to witness inside of that room the IFPT meeting, and so we were not fully included in this conversation, but I was able to witness parts of that engagement. So, given the history of colonialism and abuse, the often reported anti-Indigenous racism in the delivery of policing services, the killing of Indigenous peoples by police officers during mental wellness checks, and the dismissal by law enforcement of those reported cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, 2S, and gender diverse peoples, setting up a Red Dress Alert will be challenging. We know this. Governments have a responsibility to address these issues, especially in urban areas where policing is delivered by mainstream policing services. Call to Justice 5.8 calls on all governments to enact missing persons legislation. Preliminary national research on missing persons legislation in Canada identified huge gaps. Many provinces and territories do not have missing persons legislation that covers MMIWG, and Canada is currently lacking national standards for investigating cases of MMIWG 2S+. Without these in order, prior to implementation of a Red Dress Alert system, the process will fail to address systemic racism and build trust. CAT PTOs have already begun this work, and I would like to share with you an example from New Brunswick. In that province, working in collaboration with the right stakeholders, a national helpline was set up to help to provide support to Indigenous families when loved ones go missing. Established by our affiliate organization, the New Brunswick Aboriginal Peoples Council, in partnership with the Gignu Transition Health, established 1833-MMI-FIND, which is the helpline for families in need of direction. It's a 24-hour helpline that serves as a support, provides information and a referral service to families to navigate the various systems when a loved person goes missing. I do want to share that the 1833-MMI-FIND support line is a good example of what can be accomplished when the Indigenous communities lead the work. Equitable and respectful engagement is critical to the success of any program or policy. Okay, I see the government is developing and co-development is essential. I will leave it at that, but one more note I wanted to make is the current model with the distinctions-based approach is not necessarily working because, off-reserve Indigenous peoples are often left out of consultation process. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep this session very, very tight as we know we've got time. So I will be cutting everybody at that 6-minute mark. I'm going to pass the floor over first to Dominique Vienne. Dominique, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies, and thank you for being here today. Our study is extremely important. First of all, I think it's very promising. We hope it will be promising for women and girls, Indigenous women and girls. Now, how can we land it in a way that is relevant, effective, a red alert system, red dress alert system, so that we can make sure that there are no longer any women or girls who find themselves in impossible situations, and some of whom lose their lives. Ms. Cooper, how do you see this system? Do you see it being a nationally based system? One that would be part of this organization? We've heard that levels of police forces, you want them as partners, but not necessarily as managers of the organization. I don't think there's really anyone around this table who is questioning the relevance and importance of this organization, but rather, what do you think, in a very practical way, how do we set this up? How do we put it in place? Who's dealing with it? How much will it cost? Will it be Canada-wide? What does one do in areas where there's no cell reception, no connectivity? How do you see these things?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think that there are models out there that can be used. If you're looking at like the Amber Alert that's used for missing children, so I think there are models out there, and the Amber Alert is Canada wide, and I absolutely think there can be a model that is done like that. A lot like PEI, where it is small. We don't often see murder and missing here because they go to New Brunswick, they go to Nova Scotia, where they end up in the bigger cities in Toronto. So I think absolutely there needs to be a Canada-wide. And I think there are models out there that can be utilized, such as the Amber Alert, for something similar to this. The Looking Out for Each Other project that we partner with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia does kind of a 3-province approach, that there is that 1-800 number that they can call and they can get the supports within 3 provinces, and we work closely together to share information. Quick and dirty. Oh, I'm sorry. I said it was quick and dirty answer because I know she's going to cut me off. She said this is going to be really a fast one. So I'm just trying to give you an example that could be utilized.
I'm just going to stop. I think I'm looking at Dominique. It's just silly, something like I would say that's just fun and silly. That's all. English translation, hard. Yeah. Well, it's all good. It's all good, but I'll just continue the clock and we can just resume.
Madame Cooper,
Ms. Cooper, I was busy taking notes of what you've been telling us. For example, I didn't really understand the... May she continue with her answer? Oh, she'd finished. All right. So, Ms. Cooper, with respect to funding and the involvement of various police forces, I believe it was you who said that there had been problems in terms of interpretation, communication. Things weren't easy. They didn't understand Indigenous culture. So with respect to the management of this new program, We've heard that it would be managed by Indigenous communities and hopefully by women. What do you have to say?
I think it is essential to be community-led. It needs to be Indigenous-led. Like I had indicated in my speech, that the police and the RCMP weren't really aware of what MMIWG meant. So there had to be a lot of cross-cultural competency training with them. It's about rallying the community. We were able to rally the community through social media. So I think social media does a great job for education. We were able to rally not only people in our community, but over 200 people showed up for the search. So I think, there needs to be a lot of education and support around this. But when you're looking at taking the lead, I think it needs to be Indigenous-led.
Est-ce que Madame Cooper...
Ms. Cooper, with respect to criteria, so, for example, you launch an alert, a redress alert. Now, with respect to criteria for launching the alert, will it be the communities that decide on the criteria that will trigger this alert?
For our organization or our community, I can't speak on behalf of all, we are tight-knit in our community. A lot of our women that are at risk are homeless. They suffer mental health and addictions. So it was almost 10 days before the family noticed that there was no response from their child. So that's what triggered us into the actual search and the connection with the family. We have since put an action plan in place where we are staying connected to our vulnerable population that are the homelessness, the mental health, the addictions, the ones that are involved in the child welfare systems and poverty. There's so many areas that puts them at risk. So we do a lot now with the community about how do we check on each other and how do we make sure that we are doing regular check-ins with the most vulnerable populations.
C'est terminé?
Is my time up?
I'm now going to pass it over. I'm sorry. I'm now going to pass it over to Sonia online. Sonia, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Lisa?
I think Lisa was the...
Go ahead, Lisa.
Moi, j'étais prête, mais je pensais que ma...
I was ready, but I think that Ms. Vienne said exactly what I wanted to talk about.
Committee is in favor of a redress alert. That's not even a question. We're all in favor of it being Indigenous-led and culturally appropriate. So really what we're trying to nail down in this study is what it will look like and what's the best way, how do we approach this next. So we had, as my colleague Michelle Ferreri mentioned earlier, we had a phenomenal witness earlier this week who set up her own redress alert system. I can't remember what she called it. It was something else in her community in Nova Scotia and managed to get, I think, 4,000 people signed up to receive these alerts. And she is managing the whole thing herself, but it's really effective because the people who are receiving the alerts have all signed up. They all are engaged. They then go on and share these alerts on their social media pages, and it has a really far reach. She's had extraordinary success in helping find and save Indigenous women and girls and to us LGBTQIA people. I think 96% was the success rate. So maybe Lisa Cooper, you can just sort of talk to us about this model and whether this would work across the country, because the other model we have is the Amber Alert, for example, which is a national platform but rolled out and sort of managed by provinces and territories who then decide the parameters about when the alert's going to roll out. So maybe you can comment on some of these different models and how you think it would work best.
We didn't really create a model with our action plan. It was more or less a learning lesson from the Summer Kneebone case. We were lucky enough in our searches that we had volunteers that were non-Indigenous allies and community members and members from that community that she was from. And we were lucky enough to reach an instructor who was teaching a law course from New Brunswick or Nova Scotia who happened to be over, and he got his students involved online while we were doing the search. He had his students online. They were able to track a vehicle that's similar to hers, and because of the using social media and the people that were connected through social media in his classroom, we were able to track this vehicle down that was just recently sold. It wasn't the actual vehicle. But I think, it's dead on of what they're thinking is that you can not only depend on Indigenous communities, but in Canadians as general, when there's a call out and a process that you can utilize, a common social media platform that you can utilize, you would be amazed at how many people will get on there, especially the younger generation, because they're much more technologically witty than me. I don't use social media very often. But the amount of people that we had, it had to have been close to 400 and 500 if you're looking at social media. Amber Alert is something that I use as an example, but this one I think needs to be Indigenous-led. And I think it needs not only Indigenous, but non-Indigenous, because they are our allies. And they can share information and the resources that they have. It's like giving you 500 sets of eyes. Like you can almost track somebody down with 500 sets of eyes. So they are really dead on. Well, I don't want to use acronyms or examples because it might be mistaken on. They're very correct in social media is the way to go. I think if you're using like an Amber Alert, there needs to be connections to each other, right? We need to be able to connect to other organizations far and wide. People like we have a current person here that's from Newfoundland, Indigenous, that's at risk. I have one from Ontario. If you look at Chantel Moore, she wasn't from New Brunswick, but she was one that got murdered by a police officer through a wellness check. So I think there's such an impact across Canada. It doesn't matter where you're from.
And you make a good point that often when Indigenous people are kidnapped, that they're not kept in the same spot. They're moved off to a different province or a different part of the country. And so it makes sense that this is sort of national in scope. But the idea in Jennifer in Nova Scotia's Red Dress Alert is that people sign up for it. Do you see that do you see this as being something that goes to everyone's cell phones or something that people sign up to receive? And yes, she got lots of non-Indigenous allies signed up, but these are people who said, yes, I want to know and I want to help when someone goes missing, and I think that's a big difference between the Amber Alert system we have now. Would you support something like that? And the other thing about having people sign up is that you get their landlines if they don't have cell phones. You can reach people in remote areas other ways, not just trying to send messages to cell phones. So maybe you can reflect on that.
I think that's a great system. For PI, we don't have a lot of sex trafficking. It's more couch surfing and taking advantage of homeless women. But sex trafficking is there, and they do move them quickly from province to province. So I think, if you were to set up a system like that, I mean, you look at Idle No More. How quick did that start with some youth and then went through Canada-wide? The whole Idle No More movement. Look how many people are involved, and they're still talking about it, So, I mean, if you look at Black Lives Matter, this social media platform nowadays is the way to go if you're trying to share information. And I don't think it would be hard to set something up where people can join in on the talk and join in on the discussion and do a quick check. Hey, there might be somebody missing on PEI. Anyone, might want to share the picture or might want to share this, but I think there needs to be a lot of also consultation and discussion around that because there is privacy acts that I think you need to be careful of. And I think you need to be careful of someone's privacy if they want to be found.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. There's some people that don't want to be found for good reasons.
Thank you so much. And thanks for that, Lisa. We're now going over for the next 2.5 minutes to Adrienne LaRoche. 6 minutes for Adrienne. 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Oui. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I will. I do want to thank these witnesses who are extremely interesting. So, Lisa Cooper, every time I have an opportunity to talk about this, we heard about the red letter. I can't believe that these women and girls are victims of violence to this extent, so I sort of have to get a grip on myself. So, ladies, the first thing I would like to ask you both to respond to, perhaps Madam Cooper first. So, Madam Cooper and then Ms. Savoie. Now, I look at what's happening internationally in many areas. There are initiatives in other places that might be useful. Can you think of anything like that? There are, for example, American states that have already implemented alert systems for Indigenous women and girls in the state of Washington. For example, there are various criteria for launching an alert. When someone disappears or the person might be in danger. My colleague, Madame Vien, already mentioned this, about criteria. How are these criteria set up and defined elsewhere? If you could talk about the criteria, please. Elsewhere in the world, I mentioned the U.S., but you might want to mention other interesting initiatives.
I would have to do some research on that. For me, I think on PEI itself, and I can only speak on my experience, when there's a missing person, they do put an alert out, and it kind of goes to all of our phones, and there's an alert sound that comes, and then it says, missing youth, please contact, So it doesn't necessarily have to be a murdered person. It could be a missing person. It could be somebody of interest that they're looking for. And it is an alert sound that comes on our phones, and we go on to it, and it's looking for this person. Can they notify? Sometimes it could be a runaway that they then later say has been found. But when you're looking at something like an Amber Alert or a red dress alert, it can be the same concept, that especially when you're looking at the most vulnerable that are homeless and living on the streets and living in couch surfing, they are the most vulnerable. So if they're not contacting their family on a regular basis, it took 10 days before this alert went. We are now prepared for any alert or anything that's a red flag in our community of an Indigenous woman that's homeless that we work with among the tent city, and that if we don't check in, we don't see them in the next day or 2 or 3 days because we have mobile teams out, then we sound the alert within our organization, and then we start working with the police to sound that alert in the higher sense of putting it out to the province. So again, I think, talking to organizations that actually do the frontline work, I think is realistic, because there is, and no disrespect, there's a theoretical model. I'm not going to read off the MMIWG report. I spent 3 years creating that. And the MMIWG action plans, their theoretical models just don't work in most places. Each community has to develop a model that works for their community. How impacted is the community? How involved is the community? How far reach is the community? On PEI, we have 3 zones, Prince, Kings, and Queens County, so we can reach the whole island wide. So I think, mine's a model that fits PEI, but I think each Indigenous community has to fit their own model into this. I don't think we can put it into being a checkbox thing. It's basically, I think, drawn from the community.
Madame Savoie, je vous ai vu acheter de la...
Ms. Savoie, I saw you nodding. Do you have anything to add from your experience with respect to criteria?
Hi there. Thank you for your question. I do want to note, I know that there was another question asked, and I would like to build on what was already said, but in regards to criteria or other supports that could be extended, I just want to give an example of something that had been done to address missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in British Columbia. And it was as a commitment to truth and reconciliation, Rogers Communications had placed 3 towers along Highway 16. Highway 16 is known as the Highway of Tears due to the high number of Indigenous women and girls reported missing from the highway. And so I just wanted to make note to that. And then also around other supports that could be extended, there was conversation or a question asked around, how do we reach, communities who may not have access to cell phones or that type of technology. And, I just wanted to say, I feel like we really need to be looking at the intersectionality of overlapping oppressions that are impacting our communities, and more so our Indigenous women and girls. I think there's a lot of supports that can be extended, and through that, what is really needed is the human, technological, and fiscal capacities within our communities to be addressing the issues. Non-status and off-reserve communities have felt the greatest impact of these colonial policies. And I think to ensure that we are keeping our communities safe, there need to be more measures in regards to like economic, social, cultural, and political advancement within our communities in order to address the ongoing violence that our Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people are facing. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That's perfect. Thank you. I have to push you over to the next person. Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm going to pass you over to Leah Gazan for 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much to the witnesses. So happy to have you here. I just want to follow up. I know, Madame Cooper, you spoke about alerts, one of the questions about being able to sign up for it. I know in the consultations, one of the concerns that has been brought up is because the normalization of violence against Indigenous women and girls has been so normalized. We know that in systems, call to action 9.1 to 9.11 with policing, in society, the concern is that making it optional, people will choose not to sign up. If on a wide scale, so that's my first. What do you think of that analysis? The second very quick question I have for you, because I'd like to make sure I have time for Madame Savoy as well, is why it sounds like yours is community led. I would assume it's also woman led. Why is that important? Is it woman led? And why is it important that it's community-led prior to going into existing systems that seem to be failing?
Really good questions. I think if people have to have the choice. You can't force people to sign up. You can do a lot around the education of why it's important to sign up, and do a lot of promotion out there and campaigns on why it's important to sign up. But ultimately, you can't force people to sign up. Really, it's up to their choice. For the second, we have a number of programs. I have over 60 staff and 30 programs. So we not only address missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, we have a missing and murdered Indigenous men and boys. We use CAP's Walking in Your Moccasins model to work with men, because if we're going to keep our women safe, we have to ensure that men provide the support and advocacy for women and women's groups as well. So we want to show our males how to be a healthy male. A lot of that's been taken away from colonialism, as the gatherer of food and bringing home the food, and the war and protecting the women. That role has been changed through residential schools, 60 Scoop. So now we're looking at redefining men's roles in the family. So I think they kind of go nice in partnership. Our Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls has a committee that is all girls. But if we have a session, we also do MMIWG with MMIMB as well. So we combine the two in support. Our action plan is built directly from the community up. So it goes out to our community, and our community does input. We were I don't want to say fortunate enough, but we understand through Summer Kneebone's experience what needed to get done. We're still dealing with that, even though it's in 2023, because it still takes time to get through the courts, and the families want answer now, and they want to understand now, and they're angry.
Thank you so much, Madame Savoy. I mean, you're a very critical voice. I know. I mean, you're clearly a leader in this area, but you also are providing a youth perspective. You've spoken a lot about systemic violence, Madame Savoy, and I'm wondering, especially with policing, I want you to expand on that more. What would that look like in terms of oversight, considering the current system, current relationships, going forward? Like, what's the solution to that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think in regards to the relationship of police forces and the justice system with Indigenous peoples, oftentimes over different jurisdictions, we see the increase of the budget for different police services. And I think what is really needed is an allocation of wraparound services for our families. And we need to be able to advance the social and economic gaps that are related to addressing ongoing violence against Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit peoples. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. In the city I'm from, Winnipeg, we've actually had 6 deaths that involved police in the last 3 months. In the past 3 months, a couple related to mental health. Looking at prevention, because of course we're talking about the red dress, we never want to have to issue one because people should be safe. Do you think having more mental health supports in place would help prevent some of the vulnerabilities currently in place? If people had safe places to go to?
It is without a doubt. I think, culture and access to culture is a preventative measure, and I think we need more preventative measures rather than reactionary. I think definitely more mental health services for sure.
Would you say wraparound supports mean before a red dress and after a red dress?
I think womb to tomb, we need those wraparound services for our families from the moment of inception until, wherever, hopefully a good way to end our, whatever happens. But yeah, we need wraparound services for our families. It's so dire before a red dress alert happens.
Thank you so much. I have 10 seconds, but I love that womb to tomb. It's pretty powerful. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Because of our time, what I'm going to do is drop it down to 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and I'm going to pass the floor over to Michelle. Michelle, you have the floor for 4.
Is it not you?
Yeah.
Anna, floor for 4.
Sorry, Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both the witnesses. Some very powerful information for us. I'd like to ask Jessica a question. So I'm looking into Looking Out for Each Other project. That's an amazing project, and getting the community involved. I guess my question for you would be, how do you feel about both the Indigenous police and the RCMP working closer together? And the reason I ask this question is we did a tour last year, the Status of Women did a tour, and one of the things I learned, which I wasn't aware of, that people will kidnap children or women, and they'll take them across the country before you know it. So if we were to work together, do you think that would help prevent some of these situations? Jessica?
Thank you very much for your question. I think I mentioned before there's an intersectionality of overlapping oppressions that are facing our communities. And I do believe that there needs to be a partnership between all sectors, whether it's justice, healthcare, child welfare, with Indigenous peoples, and it needs to be Indigenous-led. But of course, because the federal government has a fiduciary responsibility for status, non-status, Métis, and Inuit people, that underlying support needs to be there. So it definitely is without a doubt that, different sectors, whether it be justice and others, need to be working with Indigenous communities.
So I guess my question would be, how do we educate our youth?
I'm going to have to interrupt for 1 moment. Did I not? The bells are ringing.
Oh.
I'm going to ask for unanimous consent for our committee to continue till 5:25. Can I have unanimous consent? All saying yes? Go ahead, Anna.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So how can we educate our youth so that they're aware of these situations? And how can we educate the men so that they understand how they need to be more respectful of women? What do you see as lacking in that?
When I think about youth, I think about the child welfare system, and there is a link between MMIWG and Canada's child welfare system, but also how can we be empowering youth is, having more preventative measures within our communities. Like I mentioned before, we need more supports in our grassroots communities. We need human, technological, and fiscal capacities in order to lead and protect our communities in good ways. And so I think to answer your question, there needs to be more culturally appropriate services and youth empowerment initiatives within communities in order to be, empowering our children, our youth, our families, and also our men, so that all men, our greater community, our greater society can do better to combat missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse peoples. Thank you.
So in the book that I read, it's called If I Go Missing by Brianna Johnny. I'm not sure if you read it. She states in there, and she doesn't hold back, she was 14 years old when she wrote the book, and she also admits that her father was a drug addict and an abuser, and it was the strong will of her mom that helped raise her so that she could do, and obviously she's done amazing things. I always feel that if, as mothers, whether we have sons or daughters, and I have one of each, it's our responsibilities to show that respect so that women aren't re-victimized by the male counterparts.
10 seconds to respond.
Oh.
I didn't hear a question.
Was there a question? Yeah. Okay. There was no question. I'm sorry. I have to pass it on as we're continuing. I'm passing it on to, Sonia. Sonia and Mark, you have the floor. I'll start with Sonia. 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses, for insightful, valuable testimony. And thank you, Leah, for your advocacy. My first question is this. We know that many Indigenous languages are spoken in Canada. On last panel, Tuesday, we heard from Ms. Jesty about how their model is unique because it allows First Nation chiefs to broadcast alert using their own voice in their own languages, making the alert more accessible. Can you talk about the importance of making sure these alerts are accessible in Indigenous languages? Ms. Cooper, you can answer that question. And then after that, Madam Chair, it's over to Mark.
Absolutely. It's absolutely good to have your own Indigenous language. Unfortunately, I don't speak Mi'kmaq. Mi'kmaq was taken from my mother as a residential school survivor, so I wasn't fortunate enough to learn Mi'kmaq. So if the code or alert was done in the Mi'kmaq language, I wouldn't know it. A lot of urban people have lost their languages. A lot of urban communities have multiple languages. So I'm on Mi'kmaq territory, my ancestral homelands. My mother born and raised here, so have I. But we also, as urban, service Cree, Ojibwe, Tlingit, Algonquin, Mohawk. I think it's great when you're looking at an Indigenous on-reserve community that was able to keep its languages. But when you're looking at urban centers, you often have multiple languages, multiple nations. And I don't know if that would be a very effective way to do it. Not saying it can't be done if they're Inuit and the national, it's put out in national and Inuit and then followed by English and then followed by French or something along that line. But I don't know if I would be in support of a call out for the Mi'kmaq language that I was an unfortunate never able to speak and my mother lost because of the residential school. I think that would hit the mark, miss the mark in some places. If you're on reserve, and there's some reserves in Inuit communities that still speak very fluently, and I love it in those communities, absolutely. But if you're looking at missing murdered across Canada, how many languages are you willing to put it out in? Would be my question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. And I thank Leah for having brought this study to our committee. I think we need more time for witnesses because the last time I'd asked questions, and I think we have to bring the federal representative back to our committee. And there is a chair who represents the 10 provinces and 3 territories. I think we should invite that person to come and appear. Ms. Cooper talked about various models of systems with alerts. But I find it terrible because Quebec wanted an alert system. So why should we in the federal government or in a province add a red dress alert. Why hasn't it already been implemented?
Suriname committee right now nationally, why have they not included murdered Indigenous women as missing in the alert system?
15.
Why has that not happened?
10 seconds to respond.
Madame Savoy?
I hate to do
Hi
this.
there.
I hate to do this, but we do have to cut you off because we're so tight on questions. If there is an answer that you have for that, we would greatly appreciate that in writing so that we can get that. I'm going to pass the floor now over to Audrey Laroche for 2 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci encore.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Savoy and Ms. Cooper. I'd like to get back that we talked about in another committee meeting. Now we've talked about the importance of social networks in reaching people when there is someone who's gone missing. Now, are there also traditional means of reaching people or legacy means of reaching people? Now, there were initiatives that we heard about in airports, for example, when we were studying human smuggling. In airports, there are pictures of missing women. So could we combine these two forms, social media and more traditional forms of communication?
I think we can expand that on to airports. We could expand that to bus stops. I've seen them in bathrooms. A poster, you shut the door and there's a picture there. So I think there are so many opportunities, and in some places, because of technology, I'm technologically challenged, so I have to excuse me. There could be videos on a screen of an airport where there are pictures that are being shown while people are waiting to board an airplane, a bus, in a bus stop. Like, there's so many opportunities now where you can have multimedia to help with the large amount, because if you're sharing this now Canada-wide, you're looking at how many missing were Indigenous women a day. But I'll leave it if Jessica would like to speak on that.
Yes, thank you. I just want to refer back to Call for Justice 2.4, and it calls on governments to provide the necessary resources and permanent funds required for the preservation and revitalization of Indigenous cultures and languages. You know, we've lost so much due to colonialism, residential schools. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Jessica, I hate cutting you off because you've got so much
fine.
to add, and I do apologize. Leah, the last 2 minutes.
Thank you. My last question is for Madame Savoy. You spoke about the child welfare system been called the pipeline for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And we know a lot of folks that are part of the child welfare system don't have connection to community or family, often who become murdered or missing. How would an urban alert be different than a rural alert, taking that into account?
That's it's a great question, and I think we could utilize what's already been done in regards to the Ambers alert. I know Lisa mentioned something about getting consent to, or asking people if they're interested in receiving these types of alerts. But I think it's important to note that 80% of Indigenous peoples live off reserve across this country, and oftentimes if a child is taken away from their family, they are off reserve. So there definitely needs to be implementation and initiatives to really draw the link between MMIWG and Canada's child welfare system. I'll just leave it at that, and I'm not sure if there's time for more.
I would just quickly add that the federal government should look at if they're making sure there's clean water, and they haven't done that very well, but they should make it that there is internet in all places, including rural places, because that's where people are at risk. And if they had some sort of even dial-up or something, at least as the start, so that has to be a federal investment.
Perfect. On behalf of the committee, I'd really like to thank Jessica and Lisa for coming today. This has been absolutely fantastic. We have agreed to end at 5:25. It's 5:26. So today's meeting is adjourned. But thank you very much to everybody. Adjourned. Good enough? Okay.